Hi, I'm Sameer Jain. A bunch of students recently asked me why is it so difficult to include alternative investments, things like private equity, real estate, hedge funds, managed futures in client portfolios. What's so special about them? So some of the things that come to mind is traditional approaches that most folks use. They fail to address significant concerns about including alternatives within a portfolio. And one of the reasons for this is allocation is especially difficult given a lack of transparency in investing and what they use in the jargon, asymmetric information. The fund manager knows a lot more about what he's doing than an investor. The lemons problem, I guess. Also differentiating expensive skills, the alpha, and inexpensive exposure to markets that can be acquired very cheaply is quite difficult to do. Properly integrating liquid and illiquid investments together is extremely hard. There are issues of stale pricing and subjective asset valuation. Not only that, even if you know how to solve all of these issues, there is this problem of having very constrained access to excellent fund managers. So what people do is gross simplification. They use rules of thumb. They extend modern portfolio theory. Unfortunately, a lot of these things just don't work in the real world. So prevalent assumptions and widely shared practices, in my opinion, are largely flawed. Moreover, the unique characteristics of alternative investments challenge traditional methods of asset allocation. So this is a problem that we at ActiveAllocator have unstintingly worked for the last 3 years. And our model is based around some key observations that I shared with the students here. One is, we do believe that the addition of alternatives to a portfolio can potentially reduce levels of risk for a given return. It can expand that elusive efficient frontier, the risk-return trade-off. We are also convinced that investors who do not have significant liquidity requirements may benefit from taking advantage of sometimes the above average returns that reside in illiquid asset classes, and these are an integral part of alternative investing. Something that we stress is, and in fact the ActiveAllocator process is built around that, is that don't separate the liquid and illiquid parts of a portfolio, and in fact try and use your liquid asset classes to effectively diversify risk in illiquid assets. And in some cases, alternative assets can be pretty well substituted for traditional ways of getting exposure to certain market factors. Since often the illiquid alternative investments in one's portfolio may provide above average returns over longer periods of times, they can be balanced by lower risk, lower return fixed income assets. Extending this way of thinking, since leverage buyouts and venture capital tend to be more highly correlated with public equities than other types of alternative investments, perhaps these can be a substitute for public equities in a portfolio, thus increasing the fixed income to public equity ratio. Also, based on our observations, other asset allocation approaches that are available to financial advisors and investors suffer from a number of shortcomings, and things like excluding alternatives from a portfolio. When doing so, investors forgo the potential benefits of diversification, risk reduction, return enhancement. The other thing that came up in the discussion was it's a flawed approach when we talk about optimizing the traditional part of the portfolio and separately allocating a predetermined percentage to alternative investments. This is fundamentally flawed, and it is not good because liquid alternatives can in some instances replace traditional asset classes and help diversify a portfolio. So the illiquid part of the portfolio does affect the liquid part of the portfolio, and closing our eyes to it is not a solution. Something else to keep in mind is the problems that can arise when including alternatives in the optimization process using common existing data. Inappropriately measuring risk and correlation can lead to unreasonable and often inappropriate allocations. At ActiveAllocator, we are pretty clear that return forecasts must be integrated across all asset classes, liquid or alternatives, it doesn't matter. And we believe that the most appropriate approach is a unified asset allocation model that includes alternative investments when appropriate, that integrates forecasts and appropriately measures risk. And that's what we've built at ActiveAllocator. We account for things like stale pricing, unique risks, illiquidity, go about accurately measuring the risk in illiquid asset classes to make them comparable to traditional liquid classes, incorporating the limits to rebalancing one's portfolio, as well as accounting for investor-specific liquidity requirements. The other thing is perhaps more important, forecasting the likely returns in asset classes that trade infrequently is pretty hard to do, and that's something that that we have spent time doing. Is those of us who are practitioners recognize that there is enormous strategy heterogeneity in alternative investments, unlike the greater homogeneity that's there between subclasses in traditional investments. So ActiveAllocator algorithms are built to resolve this greater heterogeneity in subclasses. In another video, something that you may find on activeallocator.com, I've also highlighted how we account for reporting biases, non-normal returns distribution, style drift, etc., etc. So these are some of the things that make allocation to alternative investments a pretty complex exercise, something not to be taken very lightly. I hope you like what you see on activeallocator.com, and if you want more information, don't hesitate to get in touch with me. Thank you for listening in. Bye-bye.